quality, thoughtful people who really have worked their tail off to get good at education. They spent 10, 20, 30 years doing this well. Their brain begins to get things structured. They know the way it's supposed to work. And it's just a normal part of human functioning. When you start adding new things to it, like online education, social networking, gaming, and all these other kinds of things, how does it feel to them? It feels wrong. It just doesn't feel right. And there's a reason why it doesn't feel right to them, because they've done their work to get it routinized, to get to a place where they really feel good about the things that they're doing, because that's how our brain works. And so you have to be patient with people. It's one of the reasons why I don't think top-down models work for this kind of change. I think it's a matter of engaging people. You have to start the conversation, engage the conversation, and really begin thinking about how these things can work and get people to try some of these in their own context. My guess is you probably agree with me on that. You know, the idea is to engage the conversation and figure out how we go. So the new generation of learning conversation is a big part of that. Part of our challenge is if we're going to try to build out for a next generation of learning, we're going to provide learning for the next 10 to 15, 20 years, we have a challenge, because it's not just about new generation learners. In your classes at this kind of community, this community college, my guess is you have people from multiple generations sitting in the same classroom, right? Boomers, Xers, Net Geners. You can go out 5 generations even, to the traditionals and down to the new students who are coming in, the dual enrollment program. But I'm going to talk about the meat of that market. The meat of that market are these 3 generations, the Boomers, the Xers, and the Net generation. The Boomers grew up with TVs, typewriters, telephones, memos, and a real strong kind of family focus. The Xers, my generation, grew up with video games, PC, email, CDs, and a real strong individualist focus. Sociologists often call the Boomers the family generation. They call the Xers the me generation, right? With the age of edutainment, because we're heavily focused on broadcast. Net generation, Gen Y, millennials, whatever you want to call them, have grown up fundamentally differently. If you read books like Educating the Net Generation by Diana Oak, a great book. I wrote a book I really recommend called Grown Up Digital by Don Tapscott. It talks about just how that perspective has led them to be different and draw some different kinds of conclusions. They've always known a world with the World Wide Web. In fact, many of them don't remember dial-up. Do you remember dial-up? You do. I was actually brought out to do a strategic planning workshop in Oklahoma recently on technology, and they brought us to a resort that had no high-speed internet. In fact, it was so remote we couldn't even get on our cell phone internet, the DSL cards. And so it was the first time in 2 years I actually had to use a dial-up client. And luckily for me, I had an old AOL client on my computer, and I had to find a local phone number, and I called in. And it was kind of nostalgic, right? Ring, ring, you remember that. Our kids and grandkids and nieces and nephews, they have no experience of that. They have the joy of connecting is not there. With them, it's always been on, right? They have new verbs, right? My niece came around the corner the other day and announced to our family that she had just Googled her boyfriend. We told her to never say that in front of Nana. She will not get the verb. It'll be a real problem. So much lower opinion of it. Okay? These kids have grown up with always-on cell phones, instant messages, MP3 players, and vibrant online communities, massive multiplayer online games. And if you look at how they behave, the sociologists call this generation the we generation. That's not a product endorsement. We're talking about WE. Deeply social, deeply connected, highest rates of volunteerism we've seen in years, deeply involved in politics and a whole host of other things. It's just interesting that people think it's the most narcissistic generation, but it's actually the most engaged generation if you look at the data in terms of what they've been doing. The challenge with this kind of interplay of all this is how they relate with technology and infrastructure. Again, we're talking about combining infrastructure. The Net Gen is online about 28% more than Gen X, 50% more than Boomers. The Net Gen is 50% more likely to send instant messages than Gen X, twice as likely to read blogs, 3 times as likely to use social networking sites. Although that's changing. The fastest cohort growing on Facebook is who? Baby boomers, completely taking off on Facebook. Let's talk about broadband for a second. 54% of our country is on broadband, DSL, and cable internet, high-speed internet to your homes. My guess is probably almost everybody in this room has some kind of DSL or cable going into their homes. That's almost completely based on income, if you look at it in the United States. And again, it all depends on how you measure broadband access, but we're about 19 out of 20 top industrial countries in our penetration of broadband, which is kind of embarrassing. And we pay 10 times as much for our broadband as other countries. And part of that is because, by the way, is we still view broadband high-speed internet as a luxury, not as a utility. Other countries are viewing it as a public utility and they're investing in it in that way, which is, again, just a way. And that's some of that's changing, by the way. We just hired our country's first chief technology officer, which is kind of interesting. We have a huge Department of Agriculture, but we've only just got our chief technology officer for the country. And we're thinking about how this is going to play out in terms of broadband access for all different kinds of folks. Then you think about the mobile phone infrastructure. I was on a panel in London recently with the senior vice president from AT&T. Interesting set of statistics. 60% of all phones in the world right now are mobile phones. Fastest growing trend they're seeing is people turning off landline phones altogether and only using the mobile phones as their way of connecting. How many of you have done that? Yeah. In fact, in the US, 1 out of 6 households has no landline phone. In fact, in the last election, they were freaked out when they did exit interviews because they found out 1 out of 5 voters do not have a landline phone, which calls into question all their polling models in terms of how they're doing the polling, how they're layout. In the UK, it's 1 out of 4 households does not have a landline phone. Again, mobile phone infrastructure. And it's all the way down into like second graders bringing cell phones to school for safety, sure. Okay. But it's just, again, this mobile connection infrastructure, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And then you think about our search infrastructure that we have. 15 years ago, somebody brought you a question of fact. They wanted to know something that you didn't know right off the top of your head. What did you have to do to answer the question? If you were lucky, you had a reference book handy somewhere in your office. If that reference book wasn't handy, what did you have to do next? You had to go to the library, or you had to go to your basement and dust off the encyclopedias, whatever that would be. That's just 15 years ago. It's not that long. Okay? Today, the minute somebody asks you anything you don't know, what do you immediately do? You're on Google. You're on all the different search engines. And if you haven't seen all the excitement around Wolfram Alpha that they're about to launch out, which is this site that does artificial intelligence question answering. So things like you can put in complex math questions and it'll automatically answer them for you and show you how the answer was developed. Okay? Yeah, I know. All teachers are like, great. Look up Wolfram Alpha. And again, our search infrastructures are always on information, which is why, in fact, at that conference I was at in January in Europe, they were talking about the big thing in Denmark right now is open internet testing, which means that students can use the internet when they're taking their test. And what they do is they see where they go when they go on the internet as they answer, because it's all about application-based answers. They don't care if they can get, it's not about do they remember the information, it's what do they do with the information once they get it, which is a different set of questions, which is just an open book to the extreme, right? It's like open book on steroids. But it goes to this notion of, again, the always-on infrastructure. For us, it means we've got to have these conversations to think about the infrastructures for teaching and learning in our environment. We've got great buildings, we've got libraries, we've got class resources, student service resources that are both physical and now virtual, right? And for us, it means thinking about how those things really come together and how we end that segregation of digital stuff over here and on-ground stuff over here and really think about how it comes together. If we're going to do that, and you're in the middle of a strategic planning process right now, so if you're going to do that, it means having some conversations. And first of all, it means visioning. It means going out and looking at other people and stealing good ideas, right? What are they doing? Doing some blue sky work yourself and think what's possible in terms of what you might be able to do. Then it means developing your plan, and then it means thinking about how you're going to fund it, right? Capital dollars, operational dollars, maintenance dollars. And that's a big deal, by the way, because very often people still fund technology as a side item as opposed to a core capital expense, which is a big deal, because it ends up fighting with salary dollars as opposed to infrastructure dollars. And then the big conversation is how do you make it sustainable? How do you make it something that can actually last and serve you over time so it's not something that falls apart right when you need it? Nothing's worse than a video data projector breaking down before you start the class, right? Nothing's worse than being in an online course and the learning management system doesn't work. Okay, because it's got to be a mission critical infrastructure, just like everything else. So all that really matters. Sustainability, security, stability, service, all that stuff matters in terms of going forward. If you do this work, I've been doing this work for about the last year or so, writing a book right now for Josie Bass on this, talking with K-12 educators, community college educators, university folks, and business leaders and government leaders. And what we have seen in doing this work is there are 7 what I would call, these are the catalytic conversations. These are the ones that have driven the most change to make people think about how they ramp out this infrastructure. There are conversations that you know well. You're probably playing some of these conversations here. There are things around blurring and blending of our infrastructure in our classrooms and service. It's around the idea of mobility, how we're going to bring learning to people any place, any time. The idea of gaming, the virtual worlds, social networks, high-impact presentation and engagement technologies, particularly in-class technologies, what people are doing with those kinds of things. Some really interesting conversations around analytics and evidence-based education, which is way beyond what they're talking about No Child Left Behind. And we'll talk about, it's not about learning outcomes, it's about action analytics, which we'll talk about today. And then the idea of the human touch, which I'm very happy has been a dominant conversation. The idea of how do we keep the human touch and actually enhance it and make deeper connections as we do this kind of work. And what I'd like to do is just kind of walk through these conversations, provide some resources for how you can have these conversations here and think about it, and then frame the dialogue a bit in terms of how we think about our next generation of learning. First major conversation is this idea of learning and blending. Again, what happens is the minute you start talking about technology and traditional instruction, people want to get into the bimodal distribution. They immediately want to start talking about what's better, online instruction or face-to-face, right? Have you ever heard that argument? Yeah. And the challenge with that argument is that's not the way it's working now. The modal student taking an online course is taking 2 or more on-ground courses at the same time. And if you look at the data, 30% of all the students in higher ed now have significant coursework in online education in addition to the traditional instruction. Fastest growing segment is FlexNets, or hybrid programs, where you have courses that are some online and some face-to-face. In fact, if you look at the data, what you can pretty clearly see is in the next 10 to 15 years, you're going to have 10 to 20% that is purely online, 10 to 20% that is purely face-to-face, and then the rest is going to be messy in the middle, right? It's going to be all different variations of the hybrid. Now, the hybrid doesn't mean that all these courses are going to be 50-50. No. What we're talking about is hybrid programming. So you have some courses that are online, some courses that are face-to-face, and then all different variations of those courses. So you'll have 50-50 courses where it's half online, half face-to-face, a lot of 70-30, 60-40, 80-20, depending on your assessments of the curriculum and the learning objectives and what can be done well face-to-face and what can be done online. So, for example, I'm a trustee at Western Governors University. We run the largest teachers college in the country. We're NCATER certified in all 50 states. And our online college is 80-20 about. It's about 80% online and 20% face-to-face. Is what we found is about 20% of that work that has to be done in the face-to-face format. And we deeply care about the competencies of those teachers, and we care about the outcomes. And we've only been up and running for about 5 years, and 6 of our teachers have already run National Teachers of the Year awards. Okay? So the idea is thinking about what can you do well online, what can you do well face-to-face, and the mix of wants and needs within that. Not to mention your student services. What can be done well online, what can be done well face-to-face, and thinking about the blend of that. And by the way, one of the biggest trends are the 90-10s. The 90-10s are 90% face-to-face and 10% online. Okay? In fact, the fastest growing segment of learning management systems, what do you use here? You have Blackboard, WebCT, Desire Learn, your Blackboard. Fastest use of Blackboard is not in online instruction. The heaviest use of Blackboard is for web support for traditional instruction. Right? So you're wrapping a shell across traditional instruction to provide out-of-class resources. And then vice versa, 90-10 online on-ground courses, where it's 90% online, 10% face-to-face. What's that 10% that tends to be face-to-face? Testing and assessment, orientation, or any kind of interactive labs that have to happen. In fact, I think the best community college in the country doing online education is Rio Salado College in Arizona. Absolutely phenomenal. In fact, they're even as innovative. They start classes every week. They have new classes that start every week. I mean, they're incredibly responsive. But they will tell you that their big interventions are things like they do face-to-face assessment, face-to-face orientation, and they also require faculty members to call every student within the first week to make a personal contact with the students. And all those, it's about the human connections that they're making. So they're using phone, face-to-face, and online resources to be able to connect. It's about the blend in some ways. And what's interesting about this argument is we should not be surprised about it. You cannot buy pizza, insurance, buy a plane ticket without the blend being a part of the conversation, right? Think about the commercials. What do they say? Call, click, or come in. Right? It's all about, it's not about one or the other. It's about multiple infrastructures based on what your wants and what your needs are. And for us, it means thinking about how do we design this in a way where we can again, thoughtfully put that infrastructure together and not make it Darwinian, right? So they can figure out which are the ones they want to do. We shouldn't be surprised by this because in other mission-critical places the blend is happening. I did a big conference 2 weeks ago for all the leaders of the hospitals in Texas, and the doctors will tell you that we are driving them bananas because we go to WebMD and fully self-diagnose and come in with printouts, right? We already know what's wrong with us. We just want the prescription. Just go ahead and write it. We already have documentation, journal articles, we're ready to go. We've already diagnosed ourselves. And my pediatrician, we have our youngest is 7 months old. We just had our 6-month well check. We go into our pediatrician's office. He has a wireless network in his office, mainly because for 2 reasons. One, because people in the waiting room want it. And 2, because when he got done with his well check for Max, Max loves him. And he sits down next to us afterwards and he opens up his laptop. He shows us the growth charts and where Max is on the growth charts right there on the laptop. And then he shows us the information on the different vaccinations he just gave, inoculations he just gave. He said, and by the way, he goes, is this email still active? He pulls up our record, there's our email address. I said, yeah, and he clicks on it and he sends us the links for both of those things. And I'm like, why do you do that? He goes, because you're going to look it up anyway. He goes, in this way, I make sure that you get the right links. You're going to the right places to get the good information. Because what happens for him is people leave his office and they look up their own stuff and they come back with all kinds of craziness. And so what he has learned is he's proactive about the blend. He wants to make sure that he's the one kind of driving the conversation and pulling the blend together in some ways. Again, we shouldn't be surprised by this. Of course it's happening in lots of different contexts. And then you think about mobility, about people using devices to connect into this blend, because it's broader than just being able to get on a fixed computing resource. It's really bringing blending to the next level when you can bring out an infrastructure that includes lots of different devices. How many of you brought your devices today? Brought your cell phones, your PDAs? Go ahead and get them out. For those of you who haven't, get them out. I'm not kidding. I was at a conference yesterday with government IT leaders in Texas. It was all the people, the CIOs of the government agencies in Texas. And I said this, within a half a second, all of them, like, here it is. We all have them on holsters, they're ready to roll, right? We're already looking at it. Okay, if you don't have one, you can find somebody near you who does have one, because I want you to look over your shoulder. Here's the exercise. I want you to find somebody near you that has that other device, and you need to trade your device with their device. Go ahead and make the trade. And again, if you don't have one, you got to find somebody who has one and look over their shoulder. Okay, let's go back together. Let's go back together. I want to make a few observations. First, there's a whole group of people in this audience right now that are feeling really good because you just traded up. This is a good exercise. We like what's happening here. Second, I'm a student of human behavior. I love people watching. And one of the things I think is always great about this exercise is whenever you get people doing this, there's a whole group of people that when they hand their device over, feel the need to give you a mini orientation. They're really excited about it. They show you the pictures on the front of their eye, make all these things, right? They're really personalize it, they're ready to roll. There's another group of people that feel the need to turn their device off before they hand it over to you, right? Trust issues, I don't know what's going on with that. The third, again, human behavior with this, is the longer I let this exercise go, the more the anxiety in the room goes up because somebody is touching your stuff, right? I did this once in a room of 4,000 technology educators, and I forgot to tell them to give it back. Oh my, you could cut the tension with a knife. Like after like 5 minutes, it just, people are looking all around and they run out of here. Finally somebody in the back room is like, go ahead and hand them back, but keep them out for a second. I just want to, again, viscerally connect you to the ubiquity, right, how it's everywhere, of our blended and mobile infrastructures for how we live, how we play, for how we work. Of course, it's going to be coming into how we learn. And what we need to think about is how we leverage a blended and mobile infrastructure in a thoughtful way to be connecting with this. Go ahead and put these away. Let me ask you a question. How many of you have wireless networks in your home? Look around, folks. By the way, if you don't have one, just drive by. It's not secure. You can have one. I have a friend of mine who has told the local police their password for their wireless network because they want the cops to park in front of their house, which I think is great because the police can do that. They have wireless laptops, so they'll come right in and park right in front of their house, which is great kind of police protection for it. When you think about it. What major coffee house was the first one in the U.S. to go wireless? Starbucks was the first big one. And it wasn't that long ago. It was only 2005 when they announced that in 18 months every Starbucks will be a wireless hotspot. What major fast food chain just announced they're doing the same thing? McDonald's. So McDonald's has already wired 20,000 stores in the U.S. and they plan to wire all their stores internationally. I live in rural western North Carolina, and I can tell you we have terrible broadband infrastructure. Guess where the kids spend their time? Like it's Machiavellian marketing at its worst, right? So I'm doing a student focus group in Alabama, and the students were talking about the infrastructure of their institution. One of the things they said is, one of the students said, well, my problems are Mondays. I go, what do you mean by Mondays? He goes, well, he goes, I have 3 on-ground classes and 1 online class here, which is, by the way, the modal path for the students. And he says, my problem is Mondays. I go, what do you mean? He goes, well, Mondays, I have an 8:30 until 10 o'clock class. He goes, and then I have about a 3-hour break until my next course. He goes, what I'd like to be able to do is go out in the student union, just open up my laptop and get on the wireless network and do my online work, and then do my other work for my other class while I'm there. He goes, the problem here is the wireless access is so restrictive, or you have to be upside down under a tree sideways to get the signal, or they tell you to go to the lab where you have to give a blood sample and a DNA swab and all this to be able to use it. It's just not worth it. He goes, so I just get in my car and I drive to Starbucks. He goes, and I pay $4 for a latte. And because I stayed there so long, they make me buy a muffin. He goes, and by then, I stayed there 3 hours. It's time to go back to campus. And by then, I've lost my parking spot. My greatest fear would be that our students would leave our campuses to go to McDonald's, right, to get on to the learning experiences. Now, you've got a wireless network here, right, across the campus. I was able to hop on it pretty quickly. You got some of it yes, some of it no. I see some people saying yes, some people saying no. And again, it has to do with that, how open it is and how connected it is for folks. I'll give you an example. At Sinclair Community College in Ohio, they have about 26,000 students. It's a big urban campus. And it was really designed because they didn't have enough parking downtown. They used to call it the Triple C campus, which was car class car. Right? And the idea was to get them off campus as quickly as possible because they couldn't allow the parking to back up, and so they didn't want them to stay as much as they wanted. Now, clearly, if you know retention data, that's the worst thing in the entire world to do. Many of these students don't have anybody else in their life that is connected to education. The more you keep them on campus, the more relationships they have on campus, the more likely they are to be successful, which makes all the sense in the world. Which is one of the reasons why universities require students to live on campus for the first year or second year. Again, it's just good practice, is to keep them connected as much as possible. So what they did is they looked at their library. And they had a gorgeous library. I mean, people came from other places to look at their library because it was pristine. The furniture was immaculate, that it was bought in 1974. And part of the reason it was immaculate was there. They had a 26,000 student campus. They were literally averaging between 200 and 400 people a day using the library. And they just said, this isn't acceptable. This is not the resource it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be the centerpiece of our campus. And so they did some benchmarking, some blue sky, and they worked with student focus groups. And the decision was made to put a Starbucks in the middle of the library. They put meeting tables and couches around that. They put plexiglass meeting rooms for students, study rooms for students, and for faculty around that. And then they redesigned the library. All the stacks stayed in place. They didn't throw away one book. It was all put in place. Now, they had to sedate the librarian. But she actually came on board. They now average between 2,000 and 3,000 students a day using their library, and they had to hire more library staff because students were coming to them, asking them information, asking them about how to access information, and how to find resources to help them complete assignments in their classes. That sounds like what the library's supposed to do, doesn't it? Yeah, and what's happened is that library has become an oasis on campus. It's a place that people want to come. And one of the neatest trends they're finding is students coming to campus on days they don't have classes. They're coming onto campus and studying in that library area because it's comfortable and it's a place they want to be a part of. Again, which is what the library was supposed to be kind of a part of in the first place. And again, thinking about the mobility piece, that people want to bring learning where they want to bring learning. You know, the funny thing is people think it's going to drive people away from the physical. It actually draws them in if you do it in the right way and get them connected in some way, thinking about the devices. Again, working with the docs a couple weeks ago, they were just talking to me about the fact they are training their medical technicians now to diagnose malaria in the field by using microscopes that attach to cell phone cameras. Okay? So they're having to teach people how to use mobile devices in broad ways in medicine like you can't even imagine. And so the idea is thinking about how these mobile devices will come into our work. One of the Swedish teams at the conference a couple of months ago was talking about the fact that they use their mobile phones now to do class response surveys. So they ask the class a question, they text a response back. The response is then collated and immediately comes up on the screen. So they can do instant surveys with their courses. Another example, a friend of mine is a writing instructor who is really into this notion of the affective domain, how people feel about things. And one of the things she says is you've got to get people to fall in love with writing, and that's not how most people feel. Most people are scared to death of writing and of speaking. And so one of her things is that she's kind of broke it down. She said one of the things they're most afraid of is editing. And if they don't learn to become good editors and love the editing process, they'll never be good writers. And she said that their biggest experience with editing is when they turn in a paper and they get the response back, right? That's their field of experience. That's what they think of editing is. And the minute they get a paper back, it's covered with what? It doesn't have to be red, by the way. It can be purple, it can be brown. It doesn't matter what color the ink is, they still read it negatively. And it doesn't matter how positively you phrase it, they still read it negatively in some way. In fact, somebody was just telling me about their GPS, what we were just talking about, their GPS, and when they pass their GPS system in their car, when they pass the turn they're supposed to pass, what does it say? Recalculating. And you're basically saying it had an attitude when it said that, right? It doesn't have an attitude, but you assume it had an attitude because you think you've done something wrong. So what she does is she no longer puts written feedback on papers. What she does is she reads her impression of the paper, her evaluation, into an MP3 file she's recording. And love this opening paragraph. Nice use of imagery. You have kind of a mixed metaphor in that third line. Watch that transition. Look at the grammar structure in this third sentence. And it keeps talking them through the entire paper and then tells them the grade at the end. And what she found, by the way, her students flipped. They absolutely loved it. And what they said was they downloaded the MP3 file to their MP3 player or their iPod, and they sat at the kitchen table or in the coffee shop, and they edited their paper listening to her talk them through their paper, like they were working with a professional editor, working on it together. And one of them, I love this line, one of the students said, felt like you were over my shoulder helping me the entire time. That's a different way of leveraging a mobile infrastructure, isn't it? That's a different conversation than how do we get these people to stop bringing their cell phones to class. Okay? And for us, it's thinking about how do we leverage a blended and a mobile infrastructure to do some exciting things. I don't know how many of you have seen the Kindle recently, in terms of what's going on with the Kindle. If you haven't seen it, come up afterwards, I'll show you mine. The Kindle is based on e-paper technology, so it's not screen reading. It literally is like a piece of paper that loads ink every time you turn the page. It reloads the ink on the paper. It actually was, I was talking about this 7 years ago on the Xerox labs, and now they actually have it in practice, which is great to see it. I'm a brutal critic of screen reading because I read about 1,000 pages a week. I need something that doesn't kill my eyes, plus I'm on airplanes all the time. They've got, I don't think it's perfect, but it's pretty darn close. And the great thing about it is you can have 250, 300 books on your Kindle as you're traveling with no worries. It's linked out to Oxford English Dictionary, it's linked out to Wikipedia. You can write notes, you can highlight, and all the notes and highlights, by the way, get collated, and you can send them in one place, and once you're done with the book, you get 4 pages of your notes and highlights, which I absolutely love. It's one of the things that's my favorite features of it. But the best thing is you have to be in light to be able to read it, because there's no back screen lighting for it. And you're always reading the best side of the book all the time. You have that one page, which is wonderful. They just, in the last 2 weeks, announced they're developing the Kindle for textbooks. So it's a wider format Kindle. It's going to be available for textbooks. Princeton and Case Western and a couple of others are doing the pilot phase of this. Here's the difference of the Kindle. I'm watching an interview with Tom Friedman talking about Hot, Flat, and Proud, and as he's talking about the new book, I'm interested. I want to read it. I like his last 3 books. I'm thinking about this one. So as he's doing the interview, I get on my Kindle, and it automatically manages its own link to the online store. It links out, shows me the book, talks about the recommendations, all the pieces of it. I order it, and within a minute, it's on my Kindle. And instead of paying $28 for it, I paid $9.95. Okay, instant digital access to that. To think about this in terms of ease of access for student information and textbooks. Are your textbook prices going down anytime soon? No. And the 145-pound backpacks they're carrying around campus aren't helping them much either. This is going to be an interesting way of accessing information, text-based information. Not to mention the new Kindle will read to you. So if you're in your car, you can do text-to-speech. It has automatically links out for major quotes. So if you're reading a book about Martin Luther King, you can click on the passages and it'll read. Martin Luther King will actually, do the quote for you, which is kind of powerful. It's going to be very interesting. It isn't that the thoughts, dreams, and ideas change, just the transfer system changes, right? It allows people to access it in a different way, in a mobile way. These are the big conversations we're talking about blended and mobile infrastructure. By the way, once you can get people to kind of agree, yeah, we're kind of living in a blended mobile infrastructure. I checked in for my airline flight last night without a boarding pass. They send my boarding pass to my PDA, and the little icon that has the digital barcode for that on the boarding pass is displayed on my PDA. And when I went through, I didn't have any boarding pass. I literally just turned my PDA upside down and they scan it. And it logs you right into the plane. It's all paperless, and the whole idea is for them not to have to worry about printing paper all the time. They just email that to you. This isn't going away. You're doing digital banking, you're doing digital, movie ticket sales, all these kinds of things are coming. Once people kind of get that in their bones, that we're in a blended and mobile infrastructure, then you can go to the next level conversation. But boy, you have to have that one first. If you don't have the blended and mobile one first, people still end up in that segregation mentality. You got to get that back together. Once you do that, you can jump to more, what I would call more the meatier and kind of really interesting stuff, like gaming. Gaming in simulated world, boy, the Carnegie Foundation, the MacArthur Foundation, the big funders are really excited about this, mainly because they're not doing this out of whole cloth. The military has spent billions of dollars on simulations and gaming and have proved that it works incredibly well in the teaching and learning process. If you go to a website called seriousgames.org, you'll look at the military, medicine, and business, and you'll see the amount of resources they have put into using gaming and simulations to be able to teach and reach people. Prensky's kind of the Bible in the business world, training world for ASTD and the others talking about the gaming-based world. And the problem is you bring up gaming and learning, people think you're talking about 17-year-old malcontents who are in their room too much, who don't get much sun. Okay? That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a much broader set of folks. And I want to use the example of the Wii, okay? Because many of you probably have the Wii somewhere in your world.
Way back in the day. Way back in the day.
So when they were challenging the engineers in designing the Wii, the catchphrase that they were used as kind of a slogan for development was the Wii for all. This was not a game system for kids. It was designed to reach multiple generations. In fact, the fastest growing game on the Wii is now Wii Fit, which is the interactive yoga, where they have a Wii pad that actually has you do yoga and exercise with it. So this isn't about kids, even though my kids do the Wii Fit, which I think is wonderful, and they come out dripping with sweat, which is just kind of great to see them get active as they're doing these kinds of things. But when the Wii first came out, they launched the Wii with these really innovative high-tech games like bowling, right? Tennis, right? Those were the big games that launched the Wii. And the reason they did that is they wanted multiple generations to connect with us. So the first year we had the Wii at Christmas, it was hilarious. My 8-year-old son, after our Christmas dinner, we had about 45, 50 people in our house, and he just would not stop. He corralled everybody after dinner out to the den because he wanted to do a Wii bowling tournament. Now, most people didn't even know what Wii was. They thought it was some kind of, horrible thing that Rich was going to do. But if we brought him out into the den, they all realized it was a video game, and they rolled their eyes like, okay, Rich, let's start doing it. At 4 in the morning, we kicked everybody out of our house. We're like, get out, you need to leave. Because they all got into it. They all got excited about it. Again, not about kids. The average age of a gamer right now is 33. Fastest growing cohort is the over 50 crowd. In particular, the senior citizen community is taking off with gaming. Why do you think the senior citizen community is taking off with gaming? If you had to guess. They've got time, they've got money, it's low impact exercise, it's social. In fact, there are big Wii bowling leagues now for all the senior communities.
It's a good exercise for the arthritis of our hands.
Great. In fact, I have a friend of mine who's a physical therapist. I kid you not, they have a practice that's called rehabilitation. In fact, their biggest problem is their physical therapy. They used to have to beg people to do their micro movement exercises. Their biggest problem now is they overdo them because they get so into the gaming side of it, which I think is fascinating. There's a couple of other big ones we're missing though. Grandkids. If you have it, they will come. But they don't necessarily have to come to you. As a part of the book I'm writing, I went to a retirement community and interviewed a 73-year-old man who was playing EA Sports NBA Basketball 2007 on an Xbox 360 with his 2 grandsons. His 2 grandsons were in different states at the time. They were on the internet over a headset playing on the same team. They were playing against a German team. I don't mean a computer-generated German team. I mean a team of people in Munich. And they play a league, and they play international competition from all over the world. And the time I was watching them, which I thought was wonderful, as they were playing this German team, it was the greatest thing I liked was when his grandsons got on Google to look up German trash-talking terms. By the way, it worked really well. It nerfed the other team, and they were able to win. And I talked to the guy afterwards, and he told me this great story where he basically said 2 years ago he was the ultimate curmudgeon who would have said that video games were bringing our country to hell in a handbasket. And he said, but what happened was, a year and a half ago, around Christmas, his daughter was having a hard time with their marriage, and they were going to come, his daughter and the 2 grandsons were going to stay with him he and his wife for about 2.5 weeks. And he said, I used to have this and yes and no, 5-minute phone conversation relationship with my grandkids. I just never could get bonded to them. And I knew they were going to stay with us for 2.5 weeks. It was a chance to really connect. Because when they got out of the car, the first thing the boys were carrying was an Xbox. Because I was mad. I was just furious. And my daughter calmed me down. She goes, don't worry, they'll install it. Which they did. Because I didn't know my TV could do that. And they did it. He goes, but she calmed me down. She said, Dad, just go sit with them and see what they're doing and talk with them as they're playing. So I did. I went and sat with them. And they happened to be playing basketball. And I always loved basketball, but I can't really play it anymore. I started making some recommendations, and they listened to me, and some of my ideas worked, which I thought was great. And they said I could play with them. So they gave me a controller. My first question was, where's the cord? He did. Then he goes, because the first few games it was funny because they made my character stand in the corner while they won the game. But then they started integrating me in, and I started playing with them. And little by little, I was playing with them every day. And what happened was, and we know this well, social contextual communication. They played the game, they talked about the game, but then they talked about all kinds of other stuff beyond that, right? It's like prime on top. Same thing like going to a play, talking about the play, and then all of a sudden all kinds of other conversations pop out. Same kind of deal. He goes, it was just amazing. We were playing 2 or 3 games a day, then we were doing all kinds of other stuff after that. He goes, it was just so much fun. He goes, then at the end of the 2.5 weeks, it was time for them to leave. I said, I was really emotional. Mostly because the game was leaving. He goes, but then my grandkids said, don't worry, Grandpa, we can still play. And I go, what do you mean? And he goes, we can play online. He goes, what are you talking about? He goes, they took me to Best Buy, and we bought my first Xbox, signed me up for Xbox Live. Because now we play 3 times a week as part of this league. He goes, and the exact same thing happens. We play the game, we talk about the game, and then we talk about all kinds of other stuff beyond that. He says, you never, ever could convince me of this, but video games have brought me closer to my grandkids. Okay? This is not Pong. This is not pinball. Okay, the fastest growing games are massive multiplayer online games where 1 million concurrent users play at the same time. It's a different kind of infrastructure, which is making us think differently about how we use this in simulations in the world of education. I have a lot of resources up here for you to check out if you really want to dive into this. One of them in the center is from Chris Deedy from Harvard, who's a professor there who really is probably, I think, the eminent thinker about gaming in education. And the funny thing about his work is that he won't call it games in education anymore because he says there are educators who just can't get over the idea that students are going to play and learn the same thing that they had to stay up late and drink bad coffee to learn. Right? And so he doesn't call it gaming, he calls it massive user, because of multi-user virtual environment experiential simulators. Because somehow that gives you a pass. I think that's cool. Because the thing is and also what he's found is that the games work best when the students play with the teachers. And so he does these virtual world experimental games where the students and the teachers play together. I'll give you an example. There's a game like that at Florida Virtual School that just won the big SIIA Cody Award, where it's a science course where the teacher plays with the students. The students look forward to being a part of this course. And the neat thing about the game is when the student beats the game, they have done what? They've passed the course. And because if you understand how games are put together, it's all mastery-based learning. And you have to document that you can do everything at every level to be able to get to the high. In fact, they have better learning outcome tracking in that course than they have for any other course that they teach. Okay? It's fascinating for them. But what they found is the teacher has to play with the students for it to work because of the interventions that happen along the way and the instructional piece. And the teachers actually say it's pretty hard work because of the micro intervention, because the students are really motivated. They want to go from one level to the next pretty powerfully. Again, different examples of how this works. I want to show you something from George Washington University. They put together a game that teaches EMTs about disaster scenarios and teamwork. This is absolutely brilliant. They have
You can access your additional equipment by selecting the
They
additional
literally have to
equipment
choose
button on the
characters
screen.
and go into disaster situations, make choices, interact with patients.
And drug bomb.
So they bring them out to earthquakes and fires, and they have them interact with patients, make assessments, and make choices, and actually provide treatment.
You get over there.
Now, to do this in the past, what they used to have to do is they used to have to get space, hire actors, okay, and then play the scenarios out. And then it always happened the actors overacted, and it was just kind of strange and all this. Now they have 30 and 40 EMTs playing at a time, and what they find is the interaction effect. They find out if one screws up, it ends up screwing up somebody else, and they kind of cascade it and causes challenges for them. But they can play it again, and they can play it again, and they can play it again. And again, the learning richness of that is pretty powerful for them. If you're into writing, the Violet program is a fascinating game that teaches fiction writing using a Muse-based game, which is kind of fun. And if you want to read more about this, check out James Paul Gee. I think he's one of the best writers talking about this notion of how game theory relates to learning theory in the world of education. And then a lot of people are really into Second Life. Second Life is really a game engine that creates virtual worlds for different kinds of purposes. A lot of educators have created their own Second Life islands. There are literally hundreds of universities and community colleges. Do you have a Second Life island? Have you played with that at all here? There are people doing virtual office hours in Second Life, which is kind of interesting. They're at MIT and Stanford and other places. They've found that students will go to Second Life office hours more than they go to traditional office hours, which I think is kind of interesting. I was just at the University of Texas El Paso. They're using Second Life to create science experiments islands. So that students have to take their avatar to an island and they actually conduct a science experiment while they're on the island based on all the different things that are happening within that bio, which is kind of fascinating. But they're using gaming theory to engage. Three big ways people are using gaming right now, I would argue. One is what I would call massive multiplayer orientation, where they're getting them ready for a context, which by the way, they stole from the Army. AmericasArmy.com has been doing that for 2 years. Any soldier going into basic training is encouraged to play this massive multiplayer online game to learn about rules, ranks, policies, procedures, so that they have to know all that stuff before they get to basic training, which is kind of brilliant. And by the way, they have great outcomes with that. They're doing the same thing with orientation programs for students to get them ready for the academic environment, to meet other people, to learn the policies, procedures, parking, and all that kind of good stuff. Then there are what I would call game modules. Modules you can bring into your in-class experience and online experience. Companies like Muzzy Lane Software out of Boston and other places are doing this kind of work, trying to create game modules for educators. And then there are entire courses that are games, and that's where the Chris Deedy kind of work actually comes in. It's going to be interesting. Of course, gaming is not going to take over education, but it's another tool in our toolkit, isn't it? And it's probably going to be pretty interesting. It obviously works because gaming is now bigger than movies.